A grave sits in frozen mud beside Lake Baikal. A mother, a sibling, and a child lie inside it, buried together. In 2025, researchers at the University of Copenhagen found something in their bones that should not have been there. Plague, the same bacterium that later emptied medieval cities, long before any city stood here. These people were never settled, never urban, nothing but a small family crossing a steppe. If plague needs crowds to survive, how did it reach them? And why are you still here? 4 things decided who lived long enough to leave descendants. How spread out people were. How they behaved once someone got sick. How well they cared for each other, and changes happening inside their own cells that nobody alive then could see. One of those forces is still active inside your body right now. For decades, the rule in epidemiology was simple. Plague belongs to cities. Rats need grain stores need farms, and farms need permanent settlements. So take the city away and the chain breaks. In a 1992 book on infectious disease, epidemiologists Robert Anderson and Roy May explained why. A disease like measles only survives inside a population of tens of thousands of people or more. Drop below that number, and it runs out of new bodies to infect, and it dies with its last victim. In 2025, a team led by Ust Ida at the University of Copenhagen tested that idea against real bones. They screened more than 1,300 ancient individuals and recovered 214 separate pathogen signatures, stretching back 37,000 years. That same survey found something else. Their earliest pathogen signatures are far older than any city on record. Proof that disease has always traveled with small groups of people, long before it had anywhere big to explode. Zoonotic disease, the kind that jumps from animals into people, surges sharply after roughly 6,500 years ago, almost exactly when settlements began growing larger. That is the first force. Being scattered and small was never comfortable, but it was containment. A pathogen that tears through one extended family in a single pit has, in a strange way, already lost. It has nowhere left to go. That explains why a single outbreak rarely becomes an empire-ending plague among scattered hunters and herders. It does not explain how 3 members of one family ended up sharing the same strain of bacteria in their teeth, thousands of years before anyone had a word for epidemic. This Bronze Age grave at a site called Ust Ida is exactly that kind of dead end, and exactly the kind of proof that makes the mystery real. Researchers reconstructed kinship from teeth and fragments of ancient genome, piecing together who was related to whom inside the pit. Every person they tested carried the same strain of Yersinia pestis, not separate outbreaks, picked up at different times from different sources. One outbreak, one family, one pit. 3 of the 4 forces are about populations. The 4th is about to get personal. Go back to that grave. A mother, a sibling, a child, all 3 sharing the same bacterial fingerprint in their teeth. Picture the people who buried them. They were almost certainly still alive, still breathing the same cold air, still tending to whoever in the family was left standing. They had no antibiotics, no word for bacteria, nothing modern medicine would recognize as treatment. What they had was each other, and whatever instinct told them to stay, to dress a wound, to carry water to someone too weak to lift a cup. That instinct cost some of them their lives. It is also, almost certainly, the reason enough of them survived to leave descendants whose bloodline may run all the way to you. That instinct had a name, even if no one in this grave could have used it. Long before anyone understood germs, people were already fighting infection with their hands. The Edwin Smith and Ebers papyri, Egyptian medical texts thousands of years old, describe wound dressings packed with honey and resin, substances modern researchers now recognize as genuine antiseptics. The same tradition used mosquito nets over sleeping bodies, and curators at the British Museum point to written records of entire households being evacuated once illness appeared. In the Andes and across parts of Europe, archaeologists have found skulls with holes cut into them by ancient surgeons. The bone around those holes is healed over. Healed bone means one thing. The patient lived through the operation. Field reports from paleopathologists describe something just as deliberate. Caregivers moved the sick away from camp and used smoke and poultices to keep flies away from open wounds, generation after generation, long before anyone could explain why it worked. None of that stopped a pathogen by itself. But it slowed death down, and slowing death down is exactly what a body needs to fight back. This is not a story where care always wins, though. Most small bands hit by a disease this lethal simply ended, with no descendants and no grave anyone would ever find. The Ust Ida family may be one of the lucky exceptions, not proof that ancient humans carried some secret immunity. Demography and care bought time. They never guaranteed anything. What guaranteed something was happening at a level no one standing over that grave could ever have seen, inside their own cells. In 2022, geneticists Klunk and Barreiro published an experiment in the journal Nature that reads less like a paper and more like a courtroom exhibit. They took modern human immune cells and exposed them to a reconstructed version of the same plague bacterium found at Ust Ida. Then, they measured exactly how well each cell killed it, while tracking the chemical signals it released along the way. Cells carrying certain gene variants performed far better than the rest. Those same variants are the ones that surged through European populations during the Black Death, roughly 700 years ago. Separate research teams at the Institut Pasteur, working with a wider pan-European group, traced the same pattern even further back, across nearly 10,000 years of recurring epidemics. Two genes stand out in that record: a family called OAS and a kinase known as TYK2, both rising sharply in frequency the longer epidemics kept hitting. Natural selection was not a metaphor for your ancestors. It was a filter, running in real time, generation after generation, and the genes that made it through that filter are sitting inside you right now. There is a price attached to surviving that filter. The same immune variants that helped your ancestors kill plague bacteria more efficiently are linked today to higher rates of inflammatory and autoimmune disease. Your immune system did not evolve to make you comfortable. It evolved to keep your ancestors alive long enough to have children, even when that same wiring turns against their descendants centuries later. Put the pieces back together. Demography, how scattered and small these populations were, kept the worst diseases from becoming permanent residents. Behavior and care, the instinct to act, and the choice to tend the sick slowed death down long enough for bodies and bloodlines to keep fighting. And selection spent thousands of years quietly rewriting immune genes inside the survivors, until resistance itself became hereditary. No single force saved anyone by itself. All four had to work together, at the same time, for thousands of years in a row, before one Bronze Age family at the edge of Lake Baikal could leave any trace at all. The plague that killed a mother, a sibling, and a child beside Lake Baikal is long gone. The mutations it left behind in the survivors are not. You carry them in your blood today.